2019 meeting of the Radnor Zoning Hearing Board. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Quick explanation for a slight change in schedule. My name is Bill Martin. I'm neither the chairman nor the vice chairman. The chairman and the vice chairman are currently absent. The chairman advised us by phone he is 5 to 10 minutes away. So what we are going to do here is cover the first item on our agenda, which is a request for an extension, simply because it shouldn't be that complicated. We're trying to move things along. And after we cover that item, we're then going to go into recess, which I really expect will be only 5 minutes. As soon as John comes, we're going to start the meeting, or restart the meeting. So with that being said, the first item that we're going to cover is Appeal 2904. Is the applicant for 2904 here? The applicant, Anthony and Gloria Mari, property located at 203 Church Street, request an extension of the time for obtaining a permit under Section 280-144 of the Zoning Code for an additional 6 months to February 24, 2020. If you could please put your name and address on the record and be sworn in.
My name is Anthony Mari. Oh, I'm sorry. So help me. Mari, M-A-R-I.
Mr. Mari, explain your circumstance.
Do you want my address first? You asked me for my
Please.
address. 340 Media Station Road, Apartment C 101, Media, PA.
And please explain what's going on and why you need the extension.
No sewer relief. I can't tie into the sewers. I'm stuck.
This is for the property at 203 Church. The extension would bring you to February 24, 2020. Kevin, is there any additional information on this that is worth sharing?
No, this appeal was before this board a few years ago. This is the 5th or 6th extension. There's no sewer capacity, so we can't begin to issue building permits until there's sewer capacity. And one of the conditions in the zoning ordinance is that zoning relief expires if not building permits are not issued within 6 months. So that's the nature of this request for the extension.
Any members of the board have any questions of the applicant? Would anyone like to make a motion?
Motion to approve the extension?
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Good luck. Hopefully
Thank you.
we don't see you again in 6 months.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
All right, again, and just to make clear, thank you. To make clear to the folks here, if you wander off, don't wander too far, because while we're going into recess now, we will start promptly when the chairman arrives, which I expect would be within 5 or 10 minutes. So we're going into a recess until the arrival of our chairman.
All right, we're going to get back in session. Sorry for my tardiness today. Getting here from Center City was not simple today, and then got here and Ivan Avenue was closed. So, but anyway, let's move on. One other housekeeping item that I should point out. You know, traditionally, we, the Zoning Hearing Board, does not meet during the month of August. However, we have received an application that needs to be heard within 60 days pursuant to the requirements of the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code. So as a result, and if we waited until our September meeting, we would not satisfy that requirement. So as a result, we will be holding a special meeting of the Zoning Hearing Board on August 29th at this time, at 7 in this room. Thanks, Kevin. And there will be other notices of that, but I wanted everybody to know that. So let's jump back into the agenda. Excuse me. Next matter is Appeal 3041, the applicant, James and Christine Flynn, property located at 236 North Aberdeen Avenue, zoned R5 residential. The applicant seeks to subdivide the property into 2 lots to allow for the preservation of the existing home and construction of a new single-family detached home. Applicant seeks variances from Section 280-35A1 regarding minimum lot width and Section 280-35A3 regarding front yard setback. And this matter was continued from our June 20 meeting. Counsel?
Thank you. Nick Cornelia representing the applicant. Christy?
I do. Christine Flynn, CHRISTINE, FLYNN.
And I'm going to hand up to the board, since this does involve a possible subdivision of land, we were required to go to the Planning Commission for their review, and I've marked as A9 a copy of their recommendation, which basically states that the Planning Commission reviewed the Zoning Hearing Board application and recommends the approval of the variance for Section 280-35A1 regarding minimum lot width, and Section 280-35A sub 3 regarding front yard setback. I have marked that as A9. I'll hand it up to the.
Nick, there is copies up for the board, yes. 2 copies at your chair.
Christy?
Good evening. Thank you for your time.
Where do you live?
I live at 236 North Aberdeen.
And how long have you lived there?
We've lived in that home for almost 11 years. We bought it at the end of 2008, and we've lived on the street for 16 years.
And you've prepared an application requesting relief proposed here this evening?
That's right.
And that's been marked, I believe, as A1, the application? It is, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And also A2, I marked a copy of the deed. Is that a true and correct copy of your deed on the property?
It is.
Now, I'm going to show you what's been marked as A3, which the board has a copy of, which is the aerial of the property. And could you please describe for the board where that property is located? And perhaps you want to start as you're going under the bridge on North Aberdeen into,
Yeah.
the area, that we're talking about.
Exactly. So Lancaster Avenue would be down at, over here, and you'd come under the railroad bridge. This section of North Aberdeen is one way coming out towards Lancaster Avenue, and our home is located here. So it's just close to the stop sign near the intersection with Plant Avenue.
And your home is, I guess, showing that blue mark there? And
Yes, it's on this sort of southwest side.
And you're proposing to build an additional home on this site?
That's correct.
And that's to the right of that home?
That's right.
Correct. Going to show you, and it's zoned R5?
It is
correct?
zoned R5. There is a mix of uses in the neighborhood. As you come under that railroad bridge, there are some commercial uses on both the left and the right there. There are a mix of twin homes as well as townhomes and apartments, all within the same block as this home.
I'm going to show you as A4, and if you can describe A4, which are the photographs of the surrounding area, if you can go through with A4 by page number.
Yes, so on the first page, you'll see this is the existing home here on the left, and this is the area where we would propose to build the new home. This lower photo is standing across the street from the existing home and looking to the east down North Aberdeen Avenue.
And looking across the street, what type of property is that?
That's right. So across the street directly, there's a parking area, and then there is a quad group of apartments. This is looking south.
You're looking at page 2 now?
On page 2, on the top photo there, you're looking southwest toward Plant Avenue. You can see our home in the foreground there, and then there's a single home that is sort of obscured by these trees. There's a pair of twin homes, and then as you go over towards Plant, there is, and Willow intersects there as well, there's a group of 4 townhomes that are being constructed now in that location. And then the lower photo there on page 2 shows the parking lot that's directly across the street.
And I'm sorry, when you say parking lot, is that a municipal parking lot, or is that dedicated to the use of a private owner?
And there's, if I can, I'm going to flip to the next page. It's head-in parking directly off of North Aberdeen that serves the building that's in the lower photo of page 3. And that building has an office space on the lower level and also 2 apartments on the upper levels. And then the top photo on page 3 is the quad apartment building across the street. Page 4, you can see better the home on the west side, the single-family home on the west side of the property. And then on the lower photo, you see the twin homes that are to the east. And that's on the same side of the street as the property. And then the final photos on the last page 1, labeled on there, shows some collages of homes that are also in the neighborhood nearby, not directly adjacent. You can see in the top left of the top photo an image of those townhomes that I mentioned that are under construction, some homes that are a little farther down on North Aberdeen as you go towards Lancaster Avenue. And then the homes in the bottom photo are homes that are all on the North Aberdeen to the east of the property.
Now, referring to the home in which you live, which is, I believe, that
This
top
here?
photo on page 1 of A4, is there anything unique about that home itself?
There is. It is not a designated historic home, but it was built by Jonathan Langle, who has some history in the township as both an architect and a builder of important buildings like the Saturday Club, the library, many other private residences, of course. There was a fire department building that he designed. And we have included a little write-up from the Radnor Historical Society that was labeled A5.
And what year was that your home built?
It was built in 1888.
And is your intent to attempt to preserve that home?
That is our goal, yes.
Now I'm going to show you what's been marked as first A6. which is the existing condition plan for the property. And is this the current existing conditions of the property?
It is. So you can see the existing home here, and then the property has a long driveway that has a parking area in the rear. One thing that might be difficult to tell on the screen there is that the property slopes down from the street. So the street is the high point, and then it slopes down, so the parking area is substantially below the house, and there is a stream back behind the property.
What's your total lot area?
The total lot area is a gross area of 17,670 square feet, a net area of 16,042 square feet, which is about 0.3637 acres.
Does your lot area meet the requirement of lot area for 2 single detached homes?
Yes, it does. The requirement for a single-family detached home is 5,500 square feet, so we well exceed that. When we have 2 homes, we would be above that.
And now, if you had a twin, what is the requirement for a twin?
The requirement for lot area is 5,445 square feet, and of course, we would exceed that for a pair of twins.
And do you meet the lot width requirement for twins?
We do, yes.
What's the issue? Why don't you build twins?
Well, before we purchased the property, the previous owner had proposed a compliant plan, and it involved knocking down the existing home. It involved building a set of twins with 2 two-car garages fronting onto the street, eliminating on-street parking, which is a sensitive topic in our neighborhood. We actually purchased the property from them when they got negative feedback on that idea, and so since that time, we've been thinking about how the property could be developed in a more sensitive way for the neighborhood. We believe that though the property is not designated as historic, it does have some historic value to the neighborhood, and it would be, for us, a real shame to have to knock down a house that has that charm and quality in the neighborhood.
What is the existing lot width?
The existing lot width is 98.68 feet.
And as you mentioned, for twins, the requirement's 40 feet, correct?
That's right. So we would need a minimum of 80 for the 2 twins that would be applicable.
And for a single-family detached dwelling, what is the requirement?
The minimum requirement for a single-family detached is 55 feet each. So we would need 110 for that use.
And that's what brings you here this evening.
And that's why we're here.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as A7, and this is the proposed plan. And can you tell the board what you're doing or what you're proposing?
Yes, so the existing home is shown here, and the proposed home is shown on the right side, or the east side there. What we're proposing is to shift the driveway very slightly to the west, but to keep a shared drive so that we would only have 1 curb cut because, as we mentioned, we're sensitive to the on-street parking in the neighborhood. The driveway would go down the slope, and it would access a garage in the basement of the proposed home. And this is in a location that is closer to the street than the existing parking pad, which would be approximately in this area. The other lot, the existing home, would receive a new parking pad on that lot, and there would be a shared access easement down the middle of that driveway so that both homes could access those pieces there.
Now, as you previously stated, this plan does meet the lot area requirement for each lot.
It does meet the lot area, and it does meet the side yards.
And does it also meet the building coverage requirement?
It does. It is well below the maximum of 40% for both of those lots. That was another reason that we...
Well, first, building coverage, I believe, is 35%.
I'm sorry, building, I jumped to impervious.
Right.
Apologies.
Yeah.
Yes, it is below the building coverage and the impervious.
Well below, I believe. Actually, I believe one is 8.4% and the other one is
That's correct.
18.7% building coverage.
Exactly right. Lot 1 is the 8.4. That's the existing home. And the proposed Lot 2 is the 18.7.
Now, going to impervious requirements.
Yes, thank you.
What is the impervious requirement, and what does each lot?
The maximum impervious permitted is 40%. Lot 1 is proposing 27.4, and Lot 2 is proposing 30.4.
Now, is there any current stormwater management system on this site?
No, there's not.
Are you proposing a stormwater management system?
Yes, we would propose to meet all of the township requirements for stormwater.
Have you taken into consideration limiting impervious coverage? So that shared driveway, does that reduce the requirement for impervious coverage for each lot?
It does. If we had to build a second driveway, that would, of course, be more paving and more impervious. We also have done our best to limit the length of the driveway to reduce that impervious coverage.
And as to the lot width, what is the lot widths of each lot?
The lot widths that are proposed are, forgive me, I have it here. The lot width for Lot 1 is, down here, thank you, 47.7 for Lot 1 and 51 feet for Lot 2.
And are you also requesting relief on the front yard setback?
We're requesting relief on the front setback for two reasons. One is to limit the impervious. If we've had to push the home farther back on the lot, it would extend the driveway. We would increase our impervious coverage. The other one, Nick, I'm going to change back to Exhibit A6. This neighborhood was developed prior to our current zoning ordinance, of course, and we requested that our surveyor get shots of all the existing homes on our same side of the street on our block, and none of the homes have a setback anywhere near the 25 feet that would be required by the ordinance. It's really important to us to be a part of the neighborhood, to enforce that street and make the home a nice contribution to the neighborhood rather than something that sort of sticks out and is obviously not a part of the historic character there. So what we're proposing is to match the existing homes setback, which would be consistent with the rest of the neighborhood.
I'm going to show you what has been marked as A8. Can you tell the board what A8 represents?
Yes, this is a drawing of the proposed elevation of the front of the home.
And what type of facade are we talking about?
Yeah, we're talking about a gable that faces the street with a stone water table and a sided front with some details of metal roof and some shake in the gable, as well as a bay in the front of the home.
Is it consistent with the other homes on the street?
It is. It's very similar to the homes that you can see on the images that were submitted.
We've marked as A9 and handed up the recommendation of the Planning Commission. You did precede the Planning Commission.
That's correct.
And A9 was their recommendation.
That's right.
Have you also spoken to neighbors regarding the plan?
I have. I've spent quite a bit of time reaching out to neighbors and describing the two alternatives that we're talking about. And I have with me a list. I have a petition that was signed by approximately 27 homeowners that live on North Aberdeen, Aberdeen Terrace, and Willow, Radnor Street Road, basically all of the streets surrounding the property.
I'll mark that as A10 and hand it up to the board.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I have at this time.
Questions from the board?
On the petition, and you don't have it now, so I apologize. How many of the signatures are within 100 feet? I mean, I'm trying to get a sense of.
Yeah, sure. You know what I'm going to go to is, well, 100 feet is probably.
Well, was it, Nick, was it everyone on the notice list?
It was,
What? Go ahead.
they would have been on the notice list. It's not everyone who was on the notice list. Obviously, not everyone was home when I went around. But they would be all people who lived on this street here, North Aberdeen. I did reach out to Aberdeen Terrace, which is the next block closer to Lancaster on the south side, and then along Willow here, and the cross street over here is Radnor Street Road. So it would be those homeowners in that area, in the immediate neighborhood.
Now, some people did not sign it.
Oh, no, of course.
Yeah, right, okay.
Your closest neighbors to sign.
We have both of them here.
Okay.
And this is a question either for the applicant or for council. What is the hardship?
Hardship would be what she could do, well, she's trying to preserve a home that is of historic character. And that is what we're trying to do here, and that's why we would have the hardship. What we're looking for really is the lot width requirement, and it's a small deviation from the current requirement as well. So I would hold that we have a hardship in that we are trying to preserve an existing, quote, historic structure, and secondly, that we're asking for minimal relief from the lot width requirement. As to the front yard setback, it is consistent with the neighborhood itself. That's really why we're asking for the front yard setback requirement, is because of the consistency with the neighborhood.
Thank you.
If I could add
ahead.
to that, the current zoning wouldn't, there's only one home on this block that would comply with the current zoning. So it would be very consistent with the neighborhood there
Current zoning in what regards?
in terms of lot width
Okay.
and setback.
Let's talk about the front yard setback
Sure.
request. What consideration was given in the design process to moving the structure back so that it did not encroach into the front yard setback?
It could. It does increase the impervious, as I mentioned, which is something that because of the sensitivity to that stream, we were trying to be very aware of that.
And my understanding is the testimony is that you satisfy impervious by plenty or a lot. What was?
That's correct.
The description was that you weren't up against the impervious limit.
It's not a matter of whether or not we could comply with the impervious if we were forced to push the house back. We certainly could push the house back. It's just a question of whether or not that's the right thing to do for the impervious and for the neighborhood, basically.
Right, and when you say forced to push the house back, you mean comply with our zoning code?
That's right.
Thank you. Would there be particular difficulties in constructing the structure if you complied with the front yard setback?
No. It does allow, bringing it forward, I should also add, while it reduces the impervious, it does allow for more space on the lower side of the lot, which will assist when we design the stormwater. It'll give us more room for the stormwater facilities that have to go into the lot, but it does not make it such that we would be unable to comply. We would be able to comply either way. We're talking about a difference of approximately 12 feet here on a lot that is relatively deep anyway. So it is not a matter of can we make it happen.
And in terms of the increase in the impervious, have you done calculations? What's the order of magnitude that we're talking about?
It would be about between 160 and 200 square feet of additional impervious.
So on a percentage basis, what is that?
I didn't do that math. I just calculated that it was more than.
It could be on the existing plan. Could be on the proposed plan, probably.
Yes. It would be
We have
just
2791 and 2319, so it's about 5,000 total, about 5,100 being proposed, and so it would be, how much, Chris, do you say 200 of 5,100 or 300? 4%? Okay.
So that would then put it at, approximately 31? Am I?
Yeah, it would
It
comply.
would be on lot
It would
2.
comply.
It would put it at, it sounds like 34-ish.
And you mentioned a sensitivity in the neighborhood to on-street parking. Is that simply because many of the neighboring properties do not have driveways, or that the driveway they do have does not accommodate the vehicles that the homeowner happens to own?
The north, I apologize. The north side, many of those homes do have driveways. but the south side, which is the opposite side of the street, there's a slope up on that side of the street, and that's primarily twin homes, and they do not have drives there.
Do you live at one of the at the property right now?
I do. I've lived
Are
there
you
for
pla-
11 years.
Are you planning on staying there?
I'm planning to move to the new home. My husband and I moved into this home when it was just the two of us, and we now have 2 children, ages 4 and about to turn 7, and we're feeling the need for a little bit more space, another bathroom. Those sorts of things we're feeling a little pressure in our lives for those things.
So you're thinking you're going to sell the current house that you're in?
Honestly, it depends on how much we spend on the new house, whether we sell it or retain it.
Right, because obviously my concern would be, because if the hardship is truly preserving an 1888 building and you sell it, there's nothing preventing that next person to knock it down and rebuild it. So the hardship, in my mind, kind of is going away once you do this, and the basis for the variance goes away as soon as you sell the house, because they could, right now, someone could tear it down, leave obviously the front footprint as it is, build backwards, and suddenly an 1888 house is destroyed. That's my only, fault in the hardship. Again, I think you're asking for very, I think, minimal variances here, not to the de minimis side, but it's very close.
I understand. And well, one way is to condition it.
Yeah, so we'd be open to a condition that, required that building not have, be protected in some way, at least for some period of time, for sure. I hesitate to predict what happens in 100 years from now, but.
The issue is you can always add on. I think that's not the issue that we're talking about. If the hardship is really, let's preserve the house.
Yeah.
There's no way for you to even control that, even through a deed or anything like that, but.
Well, I have heard from our commissioner in the area that there is some consideration of specific historic designation for specific lots, not in a HARB, and that this home would be a home that would be in consideration for something like that, and we would be amenable to that.
So you would be amenable to, if a condition was imposed requiring you to proceed to HARB for any change in facade of this building, you would be amenable to that condition?
Yes.
Does HARB have the jurisdiction to
They-
hear that request?
My understanding is that they do not currently, but that's something that the township is considering in other ways.
How long are you willing to wait?
For this approval?
No.
No, for the township to take other action.
We've seen how long things take.
Yeah, yeah. We would be heartbroken if this house was knocked down. That would be a terrible result for us.
I'm thinking out loud here. Can the zoning board require someone to go to HARB to get approvals? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. I'm not.
Obviously, the tough part is the house that you're going to be leaving is an existing nonconformity. So putting it, the variance is on is lot 2.
No, they both have variances on the lot width.
But again, as soon as you divide to lot 1, it's an existing nonconformity. Because you're not doing any work to lot 1. You're just subdividing and building on lot 2. Technically, it's a variance for lot 2, not a variance for lot 1. Because you're not doing anything to lot 1. Am I wrong, Kevin?
Well, you're subdividing it such that Lot 1 no longer meets the width requirement.
Correct.
Right. It needs a variance for Lot 1 because now Lot 1 is too narrow.
Correct.
Even though they're not doing any construction on the property. What
Correct,
permit do you
because
need
of
to get?
subdivision, yeah, mhm.
Because it changes the subdivision.
There would be grading permits for the driveway.
Okay,
changes.
so that's where it would hit. Okay.
Yeah, we would have to proceed, if this was approved, Christie would have to go to Saldo, to the Planning Commission and Board of Commissioners to subdivide the property. But she can't do that unless she gets the lot width relief.
And
That's
you've
why
gotten
we're
a
here.
sneak peek from planning already,
Right.
so.
Right, but we're willing to somehow condition the approval. Again, maybe the best way to do it is for a term of years, absent some sort of casualty, obviously if it burns down or falls down or,
Right.
But, I don't think there's any intent, at least on Christie's part, and I don't know if she would have a restriction in the deed anyway on the transfer that would restrict being able to knock the building down.
Okay. Anything else, Nick?
That's just exhibits to be made part of the record, please.
Okay, without objection. Are there members of the public who wish to speak on this application? Please come up, be sworn in.
Good evening. Yes. I do.
Patrick Gill. Gill.
Patrick. And Laura Gill, Lauragill.
And where do you live?
So we are at 244 North Aberdeen Avenue. So we are directly, if you're looking at the Flynn's property, we are directly to the right, directly next to the open lot. So just a few things that I wanted to bring up. We came to the Planning Commission meeting. We got a lot of really good information from them, and we wanted to bring it up here tonight as well. So we purchased our home directly next to the Flynn's exactly 4 years ago yesterday, believe it or not. And Patrick has been a longtime resident of the neighborhood. He grew up on Willow Avenue, which is the next street down. And he is very familiar. My mother-in-law actually still lives there as well. He's very familiar with many of the issues that have gone on in this neighborhood that have been brought up here tonight. Flooding, parking, space. Those are the main issues that we have heard from neighbors, residents that are currently living there, residents that have since moved because of such restrictions. Like I said, so the open space is one of our main concerns. When on our street, that block of area is really the only open space that is in the area. There, as was mentioned before, they are building 4 new townhomes. There was a duplex that was built the next block over, and there just seems to be nonstop construction of new homes on an already very crowded street. Flooding is a huge issue. What was it, August last year, where the big floods came through and pretty much destroyed most of the area. My husband and his company worked through most of the night pumping out the basements of most of the residents on Willow Avenue that had received such bad flooding. That seems to be one of the biggest concerns from myself and my neighbors, is specifically the flooding. Understanding that there is plans from the Flynn's to look into what they could do for stormwater management. It's just adding more land, more cement, more construction into an already flood-prone area. And the biggest thing is just building another house so close to ours. So, like I said, just having that open space and having the ability to, have look out the window and see trees and grass and land and sky instead of a brick wall. Honestly, that is one of my biggest concerns. So when we went to the planning advisory meeting, they advised that we meet with our neighbors and discuss with them. So I actually was able to share the plans that were presented here tonight, just was able to find them online and just give them the information, just the facts. I was able to collect about 29 signatures, maybe 30, I can't remember. Just had a few more come in today from residents on Willow Avenue and on North Aberdeen that are opposed to the addition of this new house on the street. We mostly...
Do you happen to have a copy of those for the applicant?
I do
or
not
is that
have.
the only copy?
That's my only copy, yeah. That's the original. I can definitely get a copy for the applicant.
Kevin will take care of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is my first time doing a petition. So
You're doing fine. Keep going.
okay, so most of the neighbors feel very similarly as we do. And it is, as it was brought up tonight, it was my understanding that the previous owner had done a similar investigation in the past to be able to subdivide the property and build another home. And another one of my understandings is that a big setback was the floodplain that runs in the back of our properties. When we first purchased our home, we were advised that the back end of our property is in the floodplain, and it was something that we would have to be considerate of if we ever wanted to build onto the back of our homes. So that is something of a big concern, especially for our family and friends on Willow Avenue. Any questions before I move forward? So I guess my one question that was brought up tonight is the requirements for the historical home, to your point that you brought up earlier. So I understand it is an old house. Our house was also built in 1910, so also an old house. But what would be the requirement to categorize their home as a historical home and something that they would have to look into? I understand that there's a lot of facts came up tonight about that as well.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we're the wrong people to ask that question.
Yeah, totally fine. Yeah, I mean, it was just a point that I was just considering. And it just seems like it's just a nice to have requirement that they want to keep the house because it is historical, but I don't see that that is a main reason that they would want to keep the house. I know that the main reason they want more land and more space for their family. So that seems to be the requirement, not the historical home. And lastly is just the question around the hardship. So I know it kind of goes hand in hand with the historical home, but was this a proven hardship that they are facing, or is it just a self-imposed hardship? The lot doesn't seem to be what is creating the issue. It seems to be more that they just want to have the bigger house. I don't think it's the actual lot that's creating the hardship.
Any questions from the board? I have one question. If a future owner of this lot wanted to do a construction of, say, 2 twins.
Sure.
That complied with all of the zoning requirements that they would have to comply with, you understand that
Yes.
that subsequent owner doesn't have to come to us.
Right. Yep.
To do
Yeah,
to
so
do
they were
something
approved
like
for
that.
the twins previously, correct? Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up, because my husband and I both have discussed that, and as well have discussed that as with our neighbors. And we would be for them having the ability to have the twins. I feel like putting that type of home in the center of the property and giving them the ability to maybe add driveways on either side to accommodate for the street parking, whatever the case might be. Yes, if there was, if this turned into they would not be able to have a single-family home but would be able to have twins, we would be in support of that.
Any other questions from the board? Any questions from the applicant? So, just to summarize, it's fair to describe that you are in opposition to this application, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else care to speak on this application? Good evening.
I do. Michael Mercuri, Mercuri. Okay, I'm a resident, they're neighbors immediately to the left of their property, and I've lived on that block for 57 years. First 5 years of my life, we were at 235 North Aberdeen Avenue, and at the age of 5, we moved all the way across the street. So you stay in one place long enough, you see a lot of changes. The fact of the matter is that when I was old enough to push a lawnmower, my dad volunteered me to cut their lawn. And I did that till we moved away. For the Wilkinses, they were an elderly couple. And as I was doing that, I said, man, this is a big yard. But I did that for 11, 12 years. And we moved away when I was 17, all the way into Radnor, about 3-4 miles away. And in 1980, my father, because I was getting married, offered me an opportunity to buy the house back because he had kept it. And we moved back in 1980. And as soon as we got there, I got a knock on the door, and it was the Wilkinses, and they said, could you cut my grass again? Because they didn't like the way the other guys were doing it. And I said, sure, of course. And they paid me what they wanted to but being an older adult, a young adult at that time, I said, this isn't a big yard, it's a double lot. And I said, eventually somebody's going to build something on it and subdivide it. Seen a lot of changes. That stretch of Aberdeen Avenue, North Aberdeen Avenue, used to be 2 ways. And I think I drove both ways for a short period of time when I got my driver's license. I think at the time, in the 60s and 70s, there was maybe one car per 5 homes, so you could easily navigate it. So things change. As a teenager, I saw a twin home being torn down and a 4-unit apartment being built. And that wasn't a good change, but things do change. Now we have a twin that was torn down a little while ago, and there are 4 townhomes being built. Things change. So I've come to know the Flynn's very well, being next-door neighbors, and I've watched them go into the house and improve the outside and the inside, and they've done a great job. I've seen them raise their family with 2 beautiful children. So I think, again, eventually somebody's going to do something with that property to maximize the value of the real estate. So I'm here in favor of their very nice plan with a lot of consideration taken into, preserving the existing home and building something that has the character of the existing neighborhood. And the big thing for me, well, there's 2 reasons why I'm in favor. And please, Patrick, oh, there you are. I can remember him. He was this little playing on Callan Field, honing his basketball skills. But I believe that they have the homeowners have a right to develop their property with, I think, minimal but proper input from local governing bodies. But more importantly, the second reason is that they're not coming in, building something, and moving away. They want to live here, and that is very important to me, that they're not going to come in and do something like they did across the street with the 4-unit apartments. So pretty much that's my feeling.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Second reason, because you don't want to cut the yard anymore?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I think.
I do. I'm James Sivos, last name spelled S-Z-I-V-O-S, and this is my wife,
Laura, also Sivos.
Sivos.
Spelled the same way. Spelled the same way, yes, Laura.
Laura, yeah.
Okay, and where do you live in relation to the subject property?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we actually live directly behind the Flynn's. So I believe it's this property right here. So we actually share a property line.
What is your address, sir?
It's 238 Willow Avenue. So we're at opposition for the proposition as well. So we have a few concerns. I want to make some clarifications based upon comments earlier today. So there is a parking lot directly across the street from the applicants, but that is private parking, and it is not typically used by the residents. So there is a constraint around parking. I also do want to second the fact that the property is inside the floodplains, not the entire property, but it is. But my reasons for opposing are, first of all, we fell in love with our home where we are at 238 Willow Avenue. We've been there for, I think, 4 years now, so quite a while. We have a kid on the way. We plan on staying. We just love the neighborhood and the community. So we fell in love with the home because of the view that we had, the backyard, the privacy that we have. We spent a lot of time outside entertaining. It's very unique on that street to have that sort of privacy, and on Willow Avenue, that is. No other property on Willow Avenue actually shares the backyard with just one neighbor. It's usually touching multiple property lines, 2 to 3. So that's pretty unique, and And it's unfortunate that if this gets approved, we're going to lose that. I think it's going to have a negative impact on the value of our home as well, because we valued it higher based upon what we were getting, which was pretty unique. So the most important reason why I'm here is around flooding. So flooding is a real problem in the township, and especially on Willow Avenue. I like to say it is the lowest point in the entire township. I don't know if that's factually true, but everyone on the south side of Willow Avenue had water in their basement at least 3 feet, maybe up to 5 or 6 feet, and that was back on April 14th of last year. It's not uncommon every single time it rains to be concerned, is this the time that it's going to flood? So our property, which is not as deep as theirs, but the entire property was covered in water, 2 feet. So it's a significant amount of water problem that we see in the township, especially in this neighborhood. In fact, we had about $5,000 worth of damages from the flooding. But I also want to call out a few things about stormwater management with the proposal. So our property, which is a quarter of the size, actually has 4 trees on it. And the applicants, I think they only have 4 trees on their property, and it's 4 times the size. In fact, they have a history of removing trees and not replacing them. So they're not, from what I understand, following the shady, I think it's called the shady tree endangerment policy. So they have a history of not conforming to certain things that are stipulated by the township to help the neighborhood, the community. So I think in this scenario, really what we need to focus on is how do we bring the community together? How do we bring the neighborhood together? And the flooding incident that we just saw less than a year ago was pretty impactful, and it brought a lot of people on the street together. It sounds crazy, but maybe it's one of the reasons we're looking to stay even longer. And I really am appreciative of the neighbors that pulled together, like Pat and the Yazaranos who live across the street from us, who also signed the petition, and how they helped pump out the basements of people's houses that were flooded. So I think those are one of those incidents that brings people together, and these are one of these incidents where it actually separates people instead of pulling them together. Do you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah. I just want to preface this with nobody wants to be here in opposition with their neighbors, especially ones that we, share property lines with and everything. The truth of the matter is that, I'm sorry, I'm bad with public speaking. It's, there's the property damage and everything. Just this week, we got this in the mail about Radnor Township safety with flooding. And, what we went through last summer, my husband had called me, told me there was a flood. I came right home from work, and I was walking through deep water to get back from the train station. And people were telling me, don't do that. And I didn't know because I've never been around that. It actually, once the water receded on Willow, there were chain link fences that were pulled down. There was huge logs of debris and maybe it's just I'm more sensitive now. I'm becoming a mom. Sometimes it's we love this neighborhood. We don't want to leave, but I'm scared because it's not safe. And I understand it's a small variance of 11 feet, but I'm begging you, don't give an inch, because this isn't about property value, but this is about safety, and that's what I care about. So I hate to be here. Believe me, I don't want to be here. I'm here because I have to be, and if ever we move, I want to know that I did what I could to keep this neighborhood safe. So that's why I'm here. I hate being here, and I'm done. Okay.
I do have a question for the applicants. Am I permitted to ask a question?
This is really more comment than it is questioning, but why don't you state your question as a hypothetical?
Yeah, so my question is, how many additions have been performed to this home already? Is there a history of additions on it? I think there's been 4 additions to it.
Additions on the existing
Yeah,
structure?
permitted changes to the footprint and building up and building out, I think 4? Do they know? Okay.
Yeah, we take the situation as it's presented to us today. I don't know of any variances regarding the property in prior times. Had there been, they would have been included as items that would have been disclosed on the zoning application. So to the extent that there may have been modifications to the existing property, there's nothing in the record that would indicate that they were done impermissibly.
No, they were permitted changes.
I presume what you're suggesting is that a method of the applicant addressing the need for more space is to expand the existing house?
Yes,
We understand.
a bathroom this is a lot of work to get an additional bathroom to a home. I mean, it's a reasonably large home, and there's opportunity to meet their needs around their growing family without seeking variances on property size and building an additional single-family home. I don't know if you have any questions for us. Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
We need that.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak, please? Good evening.
I do. Ruben Carvajo. The last Ruben is R-U-B-E-N, Carvajo, C-A-R. Yeah, Carvajo, C-A-R-B-A-J-O. Yeah. So I live in 113 Radnor Street Road, which is right at the end of that street. I live in 113 Radnor Street Road.
113 Radnor Street Road.
Yeah, which is at the end of that street. I'm in favor of what they are proposing to do. My perspective on it is they are already allowed to build the twins, so it's something that I feel it will eventually happen in the neighborhood. I see it's not necessarily good or bad for a neighborhood. I think it's good, but I don't think it's good or bad. And the key that I find here is how to find somebody that will do it in the right way. And I think they have the capability to do it in the right way. I have sensitivity on the flooding as well because it happened to my property the same as to other properties. I don't think that if you truly compare the 2 plans, if you compare building a set of twins or building this, I don't think it changes necessarily the prospect on the flooding. It probably happens in a very similar way. So it's a simple thing. It's just, for me, it's a simple statement just in that way, that it's better to find somebody that wants to maintain the current home and somebody that wants to do it in the right way. And I think they are trying to do it that way. And if this doesn't happen, the chances are that somebody else will do it in a worse way, in a set of twins, which can be more damaging to the neighborhood.
Could you again describe for us where your home is? You said
Yes.
113 Radnor.
So if you continue the street, it's right this way. So it's right here. So I drive, my driveway goes to this street, and that's the way I drive.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Christie, you're,
All right.
I'm sorry.
Anyone else care to speak? I thought we got everybody. Okay. Council?
Christie, you're still under oath.
I am.
You ever take a tree out?
There were 2 trees that were on the property when we purchased the property, both actually on the property line. I can point to the approximate area. There was a mulberry tree approximately here when we purchased the property 11 years ago, and that tree probably 2 years after we moved in, split and hit our neighbor, actually hit the house that the Gills live in. So it was a mulberry tree. It was removed at that point because it fell on the house. And then there was a very large maple tree that was not actually on our property, but just adjacent to our property, approximately here. And that split in Hurricane Sandy and fell down the opposite way. We got pretty lucky that it didn't come our way. It was probably a 35-inch caliber tree. It was substantial. Again, it wasn't on our property and it wasn't removed arbitrarily. We have planted since we moved in. We've planted the linden here. We planted a large maple here. We planted a redbud here, and we planted a dogwood here that is too small to be reflected on. It's still a small tree now, so it's not reflected on the survey. We've planted all of those in those areas. But we haven't planted further trees at this point because it was our anticipation that we would be here to build a new home. And of course, when we do build a new home, there will be a landscaping plan that will go with that. There is an old dogwood that is located here right now. It is reaching the end of its life. It's got a bunch of dead branches in it now. Even still, it will be sad to remove it. My kids do like to climb it. But we will have to go through the Shade Tree Commission when we pursue our approvals because of our grading, not because any of the trees have the value that would tip you into the shade tree, but because of the amount of grading. And at that point, we would propose what the replacement trees would be.
Are you aware of any additions to the home?
My thought in living in the house and knowing the floor plan of the house, I don't believe that there have been any additions to the footprint. There is a rear porch that was enclosed at some point long ago, well before we moved into the home, but no additions to the footprint make any sense with the floor plan that we have. It's really just the basic rooms that were necessary at the outset. And then my historian next door has described to me that up until the late 80s, there was a large barn in the back that was approximately somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 by 50 down in this area here. There's a flattened area back there, and whenever we landscape or work back there, we find lots of glass that happened. The barn burned at that point, and was demolished then. So there's certainly less building coverage and less impervious coverage on the property than there was at some point in the history, not all while we've owned it.
Okay, and a couple other comments. You are right that actually it looks like this lot, because it is so wide, because of its size, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 properties basically in the rear that back up to it.
That's correct.
And right here, this area here, this is the floodplain. So there's kind of a very small area of the floodplain that comes onto your property, and you're not disturbing that floodplain at all, nowhere near it, right?
No, we would not. Now, I think one thing that can be a little tricky on this property is that it seems logical when you look at the property that the stream would be the property line, but that's not the case. In fact, the stream is not on our property. It's on the property owners on Willow back here.
Nick, I'm sorry, are you identifying the
There's a
floodplain
calculated
correctly?
floodplain here. This is the calculated floodplain. There was a calculated floodplain that was created. There was a LOMAR done for the property. So you can see that heavy line, and there's a leader there that shows the calculated floodplain.
This one says floodplain digitized right here.
I'm sorry, that was the one I was
was
focusing on.
assuming This was it. You're saying this was calculated by Christian, the engineer on the property?
Yes.
Currently, as you testified, there's no stormwater management on this property, correct?
There is not.
If this is approved, you will have to put in a detention system,
That's correct.
and slowly, you would have to absorb much of the stormwater,
That's right.
and you would slowly discharge it,
Yes.
correct? Whereas currently, all of it's being run off the property?
That's correct.
So, in fact, you'll be making the stormwater situation better and not worse because of the stormwater management you'll be doing as a result of this development.
That's right. And to further that point, what we're not talking about here is whether or not this property gets developed. We're talking about how this property gets developed. I do have the plans from the previous application, which were by right, receive a recommendation from the Planning Commission, and we're moving through the process. And they have higher impervious coverage ratios than what we're proposing here.
So actually, the fact of this being kept as open space, just not going to happen.
Well, I certainly appreciate the wish to live next to open space, like a park, but that's not what this is. This is a private lot, and we purchased the property because of our ability to develop it in the future so that we could create this home here. So
again, we've heard testimony that the hardship is you want to preserve an old property.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And just finally, on the petition itself.
Yes.
The petition basically opposes the variance, but the action petition states they're opposed to building a second home on the property.
That's right. So the statement that these people signed to is that they object to the building of the second home. When I reached out to the neighbors that I spoke with, all of them came to understand that like I said, it's not if, it's how. And when they understood what the choices were, they supported the idea of the variances so that the home could be preserved and the impervious could be minimized. The parking could be preserved. That was an important issue for many people on North Aberdeen.
So is the suggestion that the opposing petitioners were in some way not telling the full story or misleading your neighbors
Oh, no,
who signed a petition in opposition?
I have no way to know what the explanation was, but what I am suggesting is that's an important point to make sure that was understood when discussing the variances, that this is not a question of whether or not there should be another house. The question is, what should that house look like?
So just to hear it correctly, when you bought the home, you actually thought about doing this. This was part of the intention of why you bought this house?
The history of it is the previous owner I have the plans here, had the plans prepared to build a set of twins that face the street.
No.
All right. Had a set of twins that face the street, two-car garages. There was a bunch of opposition in the neighborhood, so they were doing the knock-up at all the doors. We lived in a house rented down the street. When they knocked on the door, because this is my business, I said, how about we help you through that variance process that solves the concerns that they had been receiving at the time.
But it wasn't a variance.
It wasn't a
Right,
variance.
yeah.
So we said, instead of pursuing that where you're getting a lot of pushback and the neighbors are not in support of you, we can help you solve their problems through doing this variance. And let's proceed that way. They said, you know what? It's taken too long. It's put us in a bad place with the neighborhood. Would you be interested in purchasing it yourselves? And so at that point, we purchased it with this in mind for some point down the future. As I said, it wasn't necessary for us at the time. It wasn't appropriate. We had grad school to finish, and then children came, and now it's the appropriate time for us. But this was a part of our plan for the property all along.
But you did purchase it with the thought that when we grow and we get
No question.
Okay.
That was our intent.
Sure.
Yes. And the knowledge that it was zoned for 2 homes.
And the knowledge that there were a variety of zoning restrictions on any additional home that would go on the property.
That's correct. We understood that it was available, it would be permitted to have 2 homes, but because of the history with the property and what we thought would be, we thought it was a reasonable question to come and put to you that this hardship it would be a hardship to knock the house down that has value to us and to the neighborhood. We decided that we would pursue this.
And no consideration was given to expanding the size of the current home, because I recall testimony to the effect that you're desirous of more space for your family, and certainly understand that, but there was no thought given to expanding the current property.
Not particularly, because since the first day that we sort of been tuned into this property, the development of the additional lot was a part of that plan. That's always been our intention.
So when you say the additional lot, I'm not going to assume that everyone has their zoning code with them when they're at the settlement table buying a property in Radnor Township. But one of the issues you have here is you need a lot width variance to have 2 lots. So
We need a lot width variance to have 2 single-family lots, but we do have a by right use of 2 twins.
I understand the
So-
by right use, and
Yeah.
that's a separate issue. But if the perception, and, you know, I wasn't inside your head when you were buying the property, I don't know if you were thinking a twin when you were saying, oh, we can put 2 properties here, particularly given the circumstances by which you came to purchase the property, namely community opposition to a plan by right with twins. So the question then is, if you were thinking 2 separate properties, were you not aware that the lot was not wide enough for 2 separate properties?
No, I was aware, and if necessary, we could proceed with the twin property. We think it would be a real negative for the neighborhood. We think it would be a hardship to have to knock that house down. It would require us to relocate while we were under construction. It complicates financing, and it complicates a lot of things. But the development of that was the plan for growth, not an addition on the current home.
And I have another question, which was, you said this was your business. What did you mean by that?
Oh, yeah. I also work for Rockwell Custom. We're a builder on the main line and in the Philadelphia area.
So you're pretty familiar with all this process?
I am.
Yeah, she's not sitting here trying to say that she didn't know that she needed relief when she bought the house. She knew that if she was going to develop it into 2 singles, that she'd have to appear before.
Correct.
Okay.
Do you mind? And the
I don't mind at all.
Mr. Chairman, you're the chair. Ms. Caniglia, your client mentioned some of the hardships that she feels would be imposed on her by the twin. And I have to write up, obviously, an opinion, depending on which way the board goes, supporting the decision one way or the other. Could you delve into that a little bit more? Maybe the differences between the by right and what we're being presented with here?
Our hardship here is, as Christy had mentioned, is the fact that we're trying to preserve a home that is of historical type nature. Not that it is designated as historic, but as of historic type nature. And as a result, we're requesting the board to grant a de minimis, what we feel to be de minimis relief as to the lot width requirement, so that 2 single-family dwellings could be built as opposed to twins or 2 semi-detached dwellings. So really the hardship argument revolves around the fact that we have a lot that is wide but slightly not wide enough for 2 single-family dwellings, and that we're trying to preserve a home of historic type value.
Is there a hardship as well? Does your client feel as if there's a hardship with respect to the flooding that impacts her and her husband as well, their property? In other words, would the twin be worse from a flooding standpoint as opposed to what they're doing now?
I don't believe it would be, because they still would have to do stormwater management, on the site. And I don't think they have a flooding issue on their property itself.
There is a floodplain on the back of the property. It's very far at the rear of the property. We have never had water come anywhere close to our home. We don't have water in our basement. We are fortunate in that neighborhood, no question. We don't take that lightly that we're at the top of the hill there, or at least in the middle of the hill, not certainly at the top. But as Nick said, we would have to control and engineer the solutions either way that we go. But I think that it makes sense to reduce impervious wherever it's possible.
That was my point. That's not only if there was any hardship specifically to you, but the increase in flooding in the area, whether or not it goes from the by right to what you're doing now. Is there a difference?
There's more impervious, but not being the engineer, I can't quantify what that means. I think that one of the arguments that you've heard is that less impervious is preferred. So yes, we definitely had the goal of reducing impervious, and further sort of hardship for other properties would be the on-street parking. That is a big deal and something that I heard many times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just mark the exhibit.
The opposition petition. Gills presented that, so G1. Yeah. Okay, would anyone care to make a motion to kick off the discussions?
I move to deny the relief as requested.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion. Bill?
I think it's a hard question. I think that this is among the hard, I mean, I've been doing this in this board 5 or 6 years. I think this is one of the harder ones that we've had. And I think my tentative conclusion is based upon the fact that I don't think hardship in a legal sense exists. It's a single-family lot. There's a single-family home on the lot. It is reasonable as a home, and that is technically what I think you would have to show, that circumstance does not exist to show a hardship. I'm also, as to the neighbors' side and back, I acknowledge there's no right to vacant land, and they don't have a right to vacant land. I do think they have a right to anticipate that the neighboring land will be used consistent with the zoning code. And, you know, there are uses here. Again, the twin home, demolition of the existing home and construction of a larger single home, which may impinge upon some of the attractiveness that the neighbors have testified about regarding their current situation. Nonetheless, I think that as they come in, they have to accept the fact that the lot may be developed consistent with code. I don't think they should be presumed to have to accept that it would be developed pursuant to variances. So that's the reason for, you know, I would listen to arguments otherwise, but I tend to be leaning to a no at this point.
I could not have said it better. I mean, to me, the hardship is, there is no hardship. I mean, if it was historical property, absolutely, you know, I get it. But just because you really like the nature of the existing house, I mean, that's your own feeling and belief. That nothing to do with a hardship in a legal sense. And to be perfectly blunt, I think if we granted it, if anyone challenged it, it would be overruled. Because again, I think it's lacking from a legal perspective on hardship.
I think you said it well when this is pretty complicated, and I haven't seen this to this degree. And I guess from my perspective is that there isn't some harmony in the neighborhood that's supported and we've seen it in the past where all the neighbors come through and they're all in support or they're not in the support, but it seems like there's such an imbalance that, you know, just from the disruption of the neighborhood, I wouldn't be in support of favoring this.
And I agree with my colleagues. Shall we call the vote? All in favor of the motion, which is to deny the application, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? None? The application is denied. Okay, moving on to appeal number 3042. The applicant, All Seasons Flowers and Produce, property located at 912 Conestoga Road and zone GHCR. The applicant conducts a florist and related services at the property. The applicant seeks relief from section 280-49.11B and or D of the Garrett Hill zoning district to permit the seasonal sales of flowers and related products within the front yard setback. The applicant seeks a variance or such other relief required to permit the sales and storage within the front yard setback. The applicant previously received temporary relief on February 16, 2017, under appeal number 2982 for this, which expired May 31st, 2019. And this was also continued from the June 30, 2019 meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I left at your seats a letter from the property owner authorizing this appeal to be something that we were waiting on, and that is at each one of your
Great.
chairs.
And Nick, do you have that?
I do. And I can mark it, first
Yeah.
I'll swear Rita in and then I'll discuss.
I do. Rita Kurlonis, Curlonis.
As was mentioned in the application, this was subject to a prior relief back in 2017. I believe the hearing was February 16, 2017. Decision dated March 31, 2017, granting the relief here. It was a temporary relief. We're asking here this evening that it be made permanent with certain conditions. We've discussed some items with the neighbors. We believe we may have an agreement as to the type of conditions that would be appropriate for this application. I would request, probably the easiest way, and I mentioned this to Gus before the meeting started, is I would like to incorporate the entire hearing and all the exhibits from appeal number 2982, which I think makes sense here, and probably I think everyone's familiar. I know the neighbors are, and Rita is.
Makes perfect sense. I just want to point out, I don't think Scott was at that
Scott was
hearing.
not on the board.
So I'll leave to you to figure out how much detail you have.
Is there an
to do, so-
executive summary of those that you could provide?
Actually, probably pretty good executive summary right here in the order itself. Yeah. But I would request that, and I do have a couple others. I've marked the decision, and I was going to mark that as an exhibit and just put it in as dated 7/18/19 and probably mark it as A1, whereas the prior relief were all marked A1, A2, A3, A4. I've also marked the letter from the landlord that Kevin had previously mentioned. Again, I just to put a number on it, and I was wondering if I should go A1, 7/18/19, A2, 7/18/19.
If you remember where the numbering ended from the prior, from the prior hearing?
I hope I have that.
You know what, Nick, let's do it this way. Let's just call this evening's new exhibits A2-1, A2-2, A2-3, since this is the second time we've seen the applicant.
And I think it was, I'm looking here, I think 814 was the last one actually, but, you know, I'll.
All right, so those will be admitted into evidence for the record, and then we'll proceed.
Sure, B instead of.
I always forget. A1 with tonight's date, is that easiest for you?
Okay. So I'm marking as A1, the letter from the landlord, and A2 would be
I
the
like B1.
prior zoning decision.
I'm sorry,
What's the date?
B1.
B1.
B1. Okay, having solved that problem, I think we need to recess now. All right, sorry, let's go.
So I marked as B1 and B2, and I think you already have these in front of you, and they're the letter, B1's the letter from the landlord, and B2 is the prior zoning decision. I'll hand them to Gus. Is Gus keeping the record?
Brad has it, yep. B1, B2.
Now, Rita, you're the owner of All Seasons, the
With
applicant.
my sister, Margaret McCafferty.
And how long have you operated it? How long have you
This is the
operated it?
beginning of our fourth year.
And you have a lease on the property, and I've marked as B1, permission from the landlord to proceed with the zoning hearing here this evening.
Correct. I'm sorry.
And I've also marked as B2 the relief that was granted to All Seasons previously in order to maintain flowers and related products in the front yard setback.
Okay.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And you would recall that the relief granted last time revolved around the ability for you to have flowers both stored and sold in the front yard setback as well as related landscape type items.
I don't know, this year it's been tough keeping flowers there. They go so quick. But yes.
Right, okay.
Absolutely.
And have you done anything differently from the time that this relief was granted until today?
No.
Do you intend to do anything differently if this relief is to be granted here this evening?
No.
So what you're requesting here is to continue to do the exact same relief that was granted last time.
Correct.
And you're also willing to condition that on the fact that if All Seasons sold the business, the relief would terminate.
Correct.
And you're also willing to condition that on the fact that if Rita Corlonis left the business of All Seasons, the relief would terminate.
Along with my sister as well.
Along with your sister, okay. And finally...
I'm sorry, Nick, was that both or just one of the two?
I get both.
We would both go.
And finally, the relief you're requesting is the same relief as was granted last time. You're not asking for anything additional.
No.
I'm going to mark as
Wow. Some difference.
A3.
B3.
Or B3, excuse me. Some pictures. And I'm going to ask you to identify them, and then we'll hand them up as an exhibit. I'll show.
Hey, Nick, just answer me this one simple question. Why do you want to go permanent versus temporary, other than having to pay Nick legal fees and pay the township a variance fee?
Business planning?
Yeah.
But if they consistently gave you 3-year variances, you would be able to consistently plan it. I'm saying, asking for, I was on the board when this happened, so I remember all the discussions that we had, which was
Well,
which was
you'll
very good.
recall then that their initial request was not for a variance limited by time.
Correct.
Oh, I know.
I believe Mr. Martin may have come up with that one.
I thought I did, but maybe,
All right,
I'll have
maybe
to
you
check the
did.
record, I don't know.
But they weren't
Listen.
asking for a temporary one.
That is very correct, that's right, and we opposed it, that imposed it. So that's why I'm kind of going, we had reservations before, there were 3 people on this board that were, out of 4, that were here at the same exact hearing, that voted probably the same exact way. I just want to hear a good argument why it should be permanent. I get the conditions, awesome. You know as well as I do, writing in all the permutations where a variance should stop is tough. Because there could be, she loses the lease. You know, one person has a falling out. I just, again, we're all, most of us are lawyers here. We tend not to write to exceptions. It's hard. It's easier to saying, you know what, let's go temp. But that's why I wanted to hear why you
I
think permitted
really-
is better.
I think really it is regarding business planning, because the question is, this is really necessary for her business to be able to show what she's doing there. And if for some reason, after 3 years, this was terminated just by change of the board, and she has spent money, she needs the comfort to know that if she invests money in this business, that it's going to be a continual type thing and not be terminated possibly in 3 years. And I think it could also come down, I don't know if she intends to borrow, but I think from a borrowing standpoint, if she ever intended to borrow, a bank's going to say, this is a temporary variance. We can't give you the money for it. You know, I can see a lender certainly considering that. So it's really for business planning, Brad, I think, more than anything else. And it is true. I mean, she has to come back, you know, and see me every time, too. And
It's nice for Nick. It may not be nice for the applicant.
To be perfectly honest, I made a comment last time, and she held me to it, that I would do this this evening. and she held
came
me
back
to
from
it.
the shore.
Not that I recalled it, but if she told me it happened, I agree that it happened, and so I am here tonight.
Okay, let's proceed.
Look at
Okay,
this.
so, looking at B3, if you can- when were these pictures taken? All these pictures, when were they taken?
Maybe a month or so.
Okay.
I mean, when I first saw these compared to what we presented before, I was just overwhelmed with such a positive feeling. The community, the township, just has rewarded all of our efforts here at this location, and it's just been phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
And this is what you've been doing, and this is what you intend to continue doing, correct?
It's what I've been doing since I was in diapers.
And actually, I think for Halloween, you actually have pumpkins out there, maybe not the flowers, right?
We present the whole calendar of the year, and we offer what is available at that
I recall a singing Santa one year.
Oh, yes, our dancing Santa.
Dancing.
It's a shame that
Dancing
you-
and singing?
It's a shame that you can't see how beautiful this picture is, because it's in complete color here, and up there it is just a little distorted. It's really pretty.
Before, remember, you have a corner lot here, and actually, just to familiarize the board, this was from the prior zoning decision. This was the plan that was presented. It was A4 from the prior zoning decision. Here's Conestoga Road. Here's Summit Terrace, Wentworth Lane. And you'll see that the setbacks are very, very, only a couple feet from the building, from both Conestoga Road and from Wentworth. And for that reason, that's why she was requesting the relief both on Summit Terrace and Conestoga, to be able to show these plantings in the front yard setback, which is not permitted by the Garrett Hill zoning district. And this is, as the board knows, this is exclusive to this site itself. It is not being extended anywhere else. It's not only is it exclusive to this site, but it is for this type of use and for what she's showing here and what she will continue to do. Showing you B5, that's your front porch, I guess, and showing the plantings around it.
It's the nicest part of the building.
And then
It's from the-
B6, that's from Summit, I guess, correct?
Yes.
All right, and B7, this is from Conestoga Road in the front yard.
Correct.
And just to show you some of the, and I know the board's familiar with the neighborhood, and certainly neighbors are familiar with the neighborhood. But again, a couple photographs from the last zoning hearing. A5, that kind of shows your building from Conestoga Road without any of the plantings in the front.
And that's
This is
probably-
A5 from the old zoning hearing, right? Correct? You got to answer, Rita.
Yes.
I think A9 just shows the pumpkins that we talked about.
Yes.
And this
change.
again is from the old zoning hearing, A7. This is across Summit Terrace from you. It's a...
Norsini.
Yes, an automobile repair shop.
Correct.
And then A8, this is across the street from you. And what's located across the street from you?
The laundromat, dry cleaner, Conestoga Pizza, the vacant building where the frame shop used to be, and then the Ale House.
And then A6 just shows your side of the street to the west, that would be.
You have Flippin' Bailey's,
Chinese.
Zesto, Garrett Hill, and then we're at the corner there.
Okay. That's all I really have. I mean, I think the board understands
like
it.
to
Scott, do you? Okay.
Would you like to see these?
Well, they're going to be
Just
marked.
one quick question. Rita, do you think your business could be successful without being able to continue to have the ability to present in the front of the building?
No, absolutely not. That is the marketing, that's the attraction, that's the beauty, that's what the neighborhood appreciates, the decorating, the seasonality of it, and people come in with just more spirit and because of the displays that we do, and it's just, so the answer is no. Yeah, I only have one copy of this.
And any other questions from the board?
No, they're yours. Yeah. You're good. I would just request exhibits be made part of the record.
Without objection. Are there any members of the public who care to speak on this application?
I do. My name is Patty, P-A-T-T-I, Barker, B-A-R-K-E-R. I live in Rosemont, down the road from All Seasons, and I'm the former chair of the Garrett Hill Coalition. I spoke at the last zoning hearing board meeting when Rita came before you. I sent you a letter through Kevin that I'm not going to read. I'm assuming you've all read it. But we spoke to Kevin and to Nick about having conditions put on the possible granting of relief for All Seasons. The community worked very long and very hard during the Garrett Hill zoning district process in 2007 through 2009 to craft ordinances that reflected Garrett Hill values, allowing storage or sales of merchandise, goods, articles, or equipment outside or within the front yard setback was discussed at length and rejected. However, All Seasons has added immeasurably to the Garrett Hill streetscape. This business attracts people to Garrett Hill. It's a great advertisement for how to make a business and a community and a neighborhood look beautiful. So I did a number of phone calls throughout the community this week and have talked to neighbors. And generally, the attitude towards All Seasons is a positive one. Rita and her sister have brought a lot of, they're very civic-minded. They donate a Christmas tree every year. We have a Christmas tree lighting ceremony in the park. As she stated, she does a fall festival. After the Christmas tree lighting, she has people back for hot chocolate and cookies. So she brought something to the neighborhood that we didn't have before. That being said, the Garrett Hill zoning district ordinances are very near and dear to the community's heart. So we wanted to make sure that if Rita's business changed, if she sold it, if the business stopped doing business, that the variance, any relief that would granted, would revert back to what is in the Garrett Hill zoning, which is now part of the larger Radnor Township zoning code. So I wanted to let you know that and to let you know I think I'm speaking for the community. We have other neighbors here. They're welcome to come up and speak their piece. But in general, the positive things that Rita and All Seasons bring to the community outweigh any of the negatives that we see or might consider happening. So I would like to encourage you to give her the variance. Mr. Delizia, I liked your idea of, well, you put all these conditions on and maybe we should just keep it temporary. I'm like, oh, that sounds like maybe we should do that. So however you decide, we would like Rita and All Seasons to continue doing what she's doing, and that's really what I want to communicate to you, and that we appreciate what she's brought to the community, and that she's brought people into the community that I don't think would be there otherwise, as far as coming and seeing our neighborhood. And, she's right at the top of the hill as you drive up. It's sort of the gateway, and that was something we tried to do in the zoning process, is we wanted to make the gateway more attractive. So here we have a business owner and operator who has done that. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions? My only question, would you like your letter entered into the record?
Sure.
Okay, great. We're going to call that C1.
Thank you very much for your service.
Thank you very much.
I do. Sarah, S-A-R-A, and the last name is Pilling, P as in Peter, I-L-L-I-N-G. And I live at 29 Garrett Avenue. I really wanted to speak to the issue that Rita does more than bring business to Garrett Hill. With the closing of Waterloo Gardens, with closing before that of Bryn Mawr Feed and Seed, this is what we've got. And it's really good for people who want to buy plants. And plants are not only good therapy, but they also enhance our homes. The other piece that I wanted to speak to is Rita has a business, and she has to get her plants from suppliers. She can't do that at the last minute. She needs to build a relationship with a nursery to provide her material, and that doesn't come with 6 weeks' notice. So I think that her variance should be permanent as long as the business consists that she and her sister Margaret are part of the business. I just don't think she can really operate as a business if it's all last minute, if she wants to have quality material, and she has quality material. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the public care to speak on this application? Good evening.
I do. Kathy, with a K, Bogosian, B-O-G-O-S-I-A-N. And actually, you would have had a business reason before if you'd let me speak at the last meeting, which you didn't. So, anyway, I'm here to speak to why you need to plan a business. 2 years is ridiculous. I wouldn't open a business if I only knew I was going to be here 2 years. I'm from the camera shop in Bryn Mawr. That business will be 100 years old next year. Now, I'm not asking for a 100-year variance, but I live in Villanova and drive past this and have for about the past 40 years. Most of the businesses that were in there prior to Rita weren't successful. Rita has put a lot of time, effort, and money into developing this property. In those 40 years that I was driving back and forth, the businesses that were there did not work. So the building just went down. It wasn't maintained. Then when Rita got in there, all of a sudden things started to brighten up. You saw plants, the building was painted, it was decorated. It was an asset to the community. She's also an asset to the community in her community service work, as you've heard here today. I'm here to speak to the business aspect of it. I'm the past president of the Bryn Mawr Business Association for the past 10 years. So I've seen a lot of businesses come and go. And you can't say, well, I'm going to be here 2 years, let's see if it works. No, you can't. You can't get merchandise that way, as was mentioned. You have to be able to plan forward. You have to be able to count on it. Would you go to work for a company if you said, well, you can be here 2 years, maybe we'll keep you after that, maybe not? No, you can't. You need to be able to plan your life and go forward with financing and say, is this really worth the effort to stay here? If I were told I could only stay in this spot for 2 years, I'd find another spot. Why should she? She's built it up beautifully in, what, 3 or 4 years, you said? Is it really fair to limit her to 2 years? No, it's not. Think, would you do that? No, you wouldn't. So I'm asking that you somehow figure out how to work it out. So as long as Rita and her sister are involved with the business, that this business can stay there. And I have served on the zoning board, I've served on the planning commission many years. So I know there's ways of working it out, and I'm hoping that you do. Thank you.
Any questions? Thanks. Thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay.
Could I ask council to again repeat the proposed conditions that the applicant had expressed a willingness to accept?
Yes. No. Well, it kind of, I was told this evening, actually, I was told this evening by various people what the conditions were going to be. So I wasn't really aware until this evening specifically. I kind of knew what they were, but not specifically. So I guess the first one was who. It's been described to me as who, what, how. So who, it would be All Seasons, and Rita and her sister, Margaret.
Okay.
Margaret's
Let's
last name
get names.
McCafferty. 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 And Rita, Curlonis? Lonis.
So it's All Seasons while it is operated by those two individuals?
Yes, correct.
Either of those.
Yeah, I would say
By either of
I would
those
say
individuals.
either of those, yes. And
Let's get the list. Can we get the list first and then go back?
Yeah, let's get the list and then we'll wordsmith it.
And then the use itself would be the specific use that is listed in the current relief.
The current, the just terminated relief.
Correct. And I think that was really the concern, was that if Rita left the business or Margaret left the business, they don't know who would be coming in as part of the business. And perhaps a way to say that is that Rita and Margaret would at least be 50% owners. Brad, I was looking at when you said if someone else comes in, certainly I don't want to deny her the ability to bring somebody else into the business.
How about actively participating in the operation of the business?
I would agree.
Because I'd sell 49% for the right price and go retire. But that's me, Bill.
And I'll look. Kevin, Patty, you think that covers it, or? Patty, if you want.
Nick, what we're going to do?
Okay.
I'm sorry, and if we miss anything, one, I'll be surprised, and two, you can chime in. Time is not our friend, and we have another case, so.
What's in the relief?
What's in the relief, which is what describes what it is. Yeah, and I guess the other thing would be, of course, that it's a flower shop.
Well,
which is part of the relief, yeah.
no, the use is going to be
Right.
incorporated from the prior order.
Right.
And my understanding from the testimony that we've heard this evening is everybody wants it to keep, it's going great, everybody wants it to keep going great, just as it was described in the prior order. Okay, thanks, Nick. Who would like to?
Hold on. Let me, two things. Has she extended the lease? We have one more year left.
I have 10 years after that.
Okay. I did not see that, okay. And let me just, would you be willing to a 5 or a 10 year? Is that something you'd be willing to do?
We would like.
5 is good for planning.
I think that the conditions would basically cover all the concerns. The conditions cover all the concerns that this board would have.
Yeah.
That is this use, this manner of use. And, I just.
I get it. There will be a Sunday quarterback at one point if something changes and we didn't cover it in the variance and suddenly we're on the hook. That's our jobs here, is to make sure we get all the holes.
And I'm sure that.
That's why temporary is easy. I mean, that's why it's in the.
Rita would be getting a letter from Kevin if something changed, saying,
Yes, question for council.
which council?
Solicitor, I'm sorry, our solicitor.
Take your pick.
Is it within our authority to grant a variance to a property which by its terms expires per an event like a change in management?
That's a good question. I thought you were going to ask me linking it to the applicant, but you're saying change of management of the business. So in other words, the applicant is All Seasons, and we're linking it to who's operating All Seasons? I know the municipal planning code permits conditions, and it doesn't really restrict what those conditions can be. So I would tend to think that yes. I mean, if you could come up and it's rationally based, then yes, I think you can do that. And I think that is a rational basis for that condition.
Okay, who would like to make a motion?
I would move that we grant the relief requested to be consistent with the limitations imposed in the prior order dated February 16, 2017, and with the additional condition that the variance applies only so long as either Margaret McCafferty or Rita Sirlonis are actively participating in the operation of the business which is located at the premises. And I'm not proposing any time limitations on that.
Is there a second?
Kevin, is that something that you guys will be doing? Is that something you can police? Someone's being active?
No, I think that if there was a change in the business and they would be coordinating with our finance department for a new business license, we would become aware of that. Obviously, as we're out in the community, we're generally aware, not necessarily specific, but driving by, we see Rita out there all the time. So it would be odd to drive by and see somebody else out maintaining the property.
I wouldn't mind attaching some all seasons business ceases, change in ownership, the lease is broken, business sold, kind of like we talked about, conditioning also on just the business itself, as opposed to the active participation.
Well, I don't have a second on my motion, so I'll withdraw and let you make your own motion.
Shoot. I was trying to attach it to that, add to your motion. I like yours, and I just want to add some more conditions on it. I'm seconding it with an amendment. How about that? I'm seconding it with an amendment, if that's possible. Just kind of, I know, it's a first
That's
motion.
not
I
possible.
get it, I know.
The original motion needs a second. If
Fine.
there isn't one, it's been withdrawn. A new motion?
Said with what I said.
Okay, and could you again
Yes.
take it one step at a time, what your additional points are?
I think yours is going to be either they're not active in the business, or the business ceases, the business is sold, the lease is broken.
But aren't all those subsumed by the first?
No.
So if they sell the business, your point, you're trying to cover a circumstance where
They could sell the business and still be the CEO.
And you don't want to cover that.
No. I don't think that's what we're trying to do. Either we're doing them as owners, or we're doing the business itself. I don't think, or we're doing both. I'm trying to figure out what, because you're protecting the owners. I thought we were talking about the business. The fact that there's a flower store there, if it changes hands, then maybe the outside isn't as pretty as it is right now, and it changes, and the hardship changes. So again, I thought we were trying to protect, I mean, Nick had said if the business is sold, okay, well, let's make sure we get that in there, or if they happen to change ownership. I mean, I thought that's what I heard. You seem to be
Okay.
taking it up to its, so it's, to me, a lesser standard, but.
Okay, so either of the operators, neither of the operators are involved. The lease expires
Or is terminated.
or is terminated.
There could be a new lease with the same operators and the same company. So the loss of the lease kind of takes care of itself. Either they'll still be there under a new lease, or they'll be gone. In which case, the relief would terminate because the business isn't being operated in accordance with the prior order.
You know, I guess I'm a little confused because all businesses' end goal is to sell it. That's why you're in business. But moreover, maybe you'd want the same business there. Why would we limit it to not having the exact same business, irregardless of who's running it? Whether it's anybody's going to own a flower shop is going to make it nice out front. And it seems to me we're limiting then the ability to sell the business if it doesn't have the ability to keep it going. Because the value is that it's a flower shop and it's great for the community. So why are we putting a limitation on wanting to sell it to anybody? Just it should be a like business.
That this is, there's actually no motion that we're discussing right now. So we're just spitballing here. The testimony at the prior hearing, if one were to go back to the transcript, would probably indicate that there was some concern in the community about how this would all work out for everybody. And when I saw this application come in and saw the other materials that have come in the testimony this evening, my sense is the community thinks it's going great, but it's a known quantity. It's a business operated by two proprietors that are doing great work, and the basis upon which they were permitted to build their business was subject to having to come back to us at some point in time. So one might view the evidence that's been offered this evening and say they've done everything that they've been asked to do. The community is behind them, but the community does not want to write a blank check in its support because it doesn't know how the business would be operated if it was run by someone else. So I think that's, and I would, reasonable minds can differ as to whether the goal of being in business is to sell it. But leaving that aside, I think we need to kind of focus on the particular issues that are presented in the record here this evening, which is we've got a request for a permanent relief that was once temporary. It was conditioned on a manner of operation, which has been satisfied. The community is in support of it generally, but would like some additional conditions, which the applicant appears to be agreeable to. So now the excitement is for us to figure out what the words are going to be. So would someone like to make a motion? I'm not allowed to make a motion.
Well, I'm going to repeat my prior motion and look for a second, which is one or the other has to be involved. One or the other current proprietors have to be involved in operations. You know, actively participating in the operation of the business. And if that is satisfied, I think the variance should be applied.
I second it.
Mr. Martin, to make it clear, and you're removing the temporariness of the prior order, correct?
Yes.
The prior order has terminated by its terms. I think if you read it strictly. And why would we do that up here? So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion?
I actually was not the limit last time I agreed to because it was a necessary compromise to get the variance granted. I thought it was tighter than it needed to be, and I'm sympathetic to not burdening the business with a requirement to keep coming back to us. That stretch has empty storefronts. One of the pizza shops is empty. The framing shop is empty. There might be a third if I remember for a little bit. So I think if you have a successful retail business that people are happy with, that we should try to go out of our way to work with it. So that's why I'm supportive of my motion.
Well, I want to make very clear, we're not all attorneys up here, so, and because I am in retail, and I do believe there's always an end goal, I'm certainly applauding and supporting the amendment, but it's not the way I'd want to do it, as I had stated. Wanting to sell is an important part, and now we're limiting that from a value standpoint. But if this is what it takes to keep it going, I'm about supporting it.
I was for it before, I'm for it now. I like the suggestion about the change of control, change of ownership, because I believe that absent a neighbor who's thinking they're a policeman, no one's going to turn them in. It's just like people building sheds in their backyard and they never pull a permit. You know, the only way the township ever finds out is someone turns them in. It would be nice if it was a little bit more straightforward. So if the township happened to get a license or a permit filing, they would know. My preference is a temporary one again, and just giving longer time period, because again, I do remember the hearing. I remember the fact that they were in front of us because they were doing it, and they weren't allowed to. And that's where, the Garrett Hill has their own separate code, and they wrote it that way for a reason. It's great to hear that I would prefer they change the code. That would be the best way to do it, because that's how you cover most of the variances. But so that's why I'm concerned if we're too loose with it, that it may not cover what they were all talking about that they wanted. That's all. So again, I'm in favor of it. I'm just in favor of putting the restrictions that Nick was suggesting and saying, fine, that's what everyone agreed to, let's do what everyone said. Or in the alternative, give it temporary. So that's my thought.
I'm in support of the motion. This is one of these instances where, I fight my natural inclination to over-lawyer things. And this is a small business that is doing good things for the community. The community has adopted it. The community trusts the proprietors that are running it. And I could come up, given time and a modest budget, I could come up with several pages of conditions that could probably cover each and every concern that Brad has about how we're doing this. But life is too short, and these folks are doing good things. So, I think the motion gets us where we need to be. I suspect that if there are transgressions, the appropriate folks will hear about them. Because if nothing else, Garrett Hill is tight-knit and has spent a lot of time trying to put something together that works for the community. And the folks that have done that are very protective of what those provisions do. So with that, I'm going to call the motion for a vote. All in favor of the motion granting the application with the conditions stated, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed?
I'm not going to go against this.
The motion is approved. Keep doing great stuff. 5-minute break, and then we'll hear the last case. All right, let's return to work here. The last case of the evening is appeal number 3044. The applicant, Simon Dibble, property located at 94 Oakford Road and zoned R3 residential. The applicant is requesting a variance from section 280-25E of the code to construct a deck to the rear of the home. In the alternative, applicant contends that the use is permitted by right. Good evening.
Good evening. This is my contractor who'll be building the deck, so he's here if you have any.
Both need to be sworn in.
Okay. I do.
Tom Ferreira, that's P, P as in Peter, E-R-E-I-R-A.
Simon Dibble, so S-I-M-O-N-D-I-B-B-L-E.
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening.
How can we help you?
I would like to build a deck on the back of my property, as shown here. This is would be the new deck there, and the corner part of this deck kind of is. Oh, sorry. Yep. So yes, I'd like to build a deck on the back of the property, and the deck would overflow the 35-foot offset from the side boundary to my neighbour.
And do you know roughly the amount of space that it goes into the setback?
Yes, on the survey, which is here, basically the offset would be 25 feet or 24.1 feet, and the offset needs to be 35 feet.
Yeah, in terms of the square footage of the deck that is actually in the setback, have you calculated that?
The house currently sits at 36, so you can't really build a deck at all if we don't get a dimensional variance. The actual house, I'm general contractor. I've been working with Simon since 2016. Done a bunch of renovations for him. Just to give you a little update of the property, he's a corner lot between Crestview Road and Oxford Road. He has issues in the backyard because he's at the bottom of a hill, and everyone else's properties, when it rains, it all comes down, and it's been kind of like a swampy marsh. His neighbors have been pretty cool about it. We actually tried to add 3 triaxles of dirt and try to make it a usable backyard, which it's not. In 2016, we redid his kitchen, planning, where he has double windows right about here where the deck would open up to, that we'd like to put French doors. He really just wants to have barbecues and have people and be able to use his backyard that's not really usable at the moment. So, he's just going for that dimensional variance.
So the deck itself is 20 by 13, so 260 square feet. And if you imagine the line where the boundary would be is about here, so if you say half of the deck would be.
I think that was his
over that
question.
offset.
Yeah, the issue, so we're dealing with dimensional variance. You're showing that the rear property line, so I'm going to call it the rear, even though you have 2 front yards, is irregular significantly. And that irregularity is causing you a hardship to be able to put the deck in that location.
Yeah.
If it was square, you'd be fine, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Is there any other spot on the property you think you could put a deck?
No, because it doesn't show in the building, but our kitchen and dining room is right here. So the doors come out.
You can reference your pictures if you want, that you gave us, if you want to show us where it is.
Yeah, I don't have copies of those. But
There you go. You can borrow mine. There you go. We're gonna speed this one up for you guys.
You've been very patient. So
Yes, we'll help you through
appreciate
this.
that.
We'll help you through
I haven't
this.
got an army of people for me. All against
Public
me.
comment
You
will
don't
be
need
brief.
it. You don't need it. So show us where.
So this is the back of the property. These windows here are in the dining room. That window's on the kitchen, so the deck would go along here. These would come out, and there'll be French doors in here to go out to the deck, and these trees will get probably moved out the way.
A deck where your current kind of doors does not make any sense, and then the other And the other only location would be next to your garage, which is silly, too.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
And this will be a deck that'll be at the grade of, I guess, the main floor of the home? So it'll be a
Correct, yeah.
straight
So it
walk out
would
from the
be-
dining room?
Yes. In the dining room, these windows are probably 2 feet off the ground, so yes, if you look carefully at the picture, you can see there's stucco in the lower part of that wall below the siding, and that's about the floor level. And then below it is a basement. It's a split level home.
Have you talked with your neighbors about the proposal, and what, if anything, have they said?
Well, I took that photo. I'm standing on the property line, my back to that neighbour. I've spoken to him about it, and they're perfectly cool. His property's actually probably 4 feet higher grade than mine.
Could you, in referencing to the neighbors you spoke to, do it off of the plan, sort of give us a sense that way?
The neighbour who lives here.
No, he lives here.
Well, I spoke to this neighbour here, who's a neighbour on Crestview. His property is above grade to mine. He's the one that would actually overlook it. The next neighbour down Oakford his home's probably 100 feet further down. It's quite a distance. So as Tom said, I'm the lowest point in that area. So the decks wouldn't overlook his property. In fact, it's the other way around. They overlook mine.
And Kevin, it would be our best understanding that all the notices went out to the neighbors?
As far as I'm aware of, correct.
And one other question for me. The intention is to only use this as a deck, and you don't have intentions of ever enclosing it or using it for any other purpose than the typical open-air deck that we're familiar with?
The grill was going to go on it, so I'm certainly not going to enclose it with the grill on there. So yes, it's just going to be an open-air deck there will be steps coming down into the patio.
Any other questions from the board?
I'm good.
Okay, would you like to move your exhibits to be entered into the record?
Sure.
Without objection? Is there a motion? Excuse me. Would any member of the public like to speak on this matter? Seeing none, who would like to make a motion to start discussion?
There we go. Motion to approve a variance from section 280E, 280-25E of the code pursuant to the plans and the testimony on the record.
And I would,
I'll second that.
any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is approved. Good luck with your project. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't you wish they're all that easy?
Yes, we do. We're adjourned until August 29th.